Hello, California, and welcome to this week's edition of Your Financial Compass, the show that's dedicated to helping you successfully navigate to and through your retirement. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, and joining me in the studio is Chris Bulman. He is the founder and a financial advisor at Bulman Wealth Group, and financial advisor Scott Vlahon. Chris, Scott, I am so excited to be back with you this week. How are you?
Fantastic. Good. Looking forward to another fun show.
Yeah, so I just celebrated my 13th wedding anniversary with my wife.
Congratulations.
So, and then Chris and I have been working together for 12 years. She tolerates me for 13 years, and I tolerate Chris now for 12.
For 12.
So it's that push-pull kind of give or take.
Lots to celebrate, right?
Yeah.
Well, I often refer to you guys as the dynamic duo, and you've put together another dynamic show for our viewers at home this week. The reality is that when it comes to your retirement plan, there is no one-size-fits-all strategy. This is a very individualized, customized, personalized process. However, there's one thing that affects all of us, no matter our age, no matter where we are on the retirement spectrum. That is the impact of the economy. And there are so many unknowns, so many things going on in our world today. And so that's the goal of today's show, is to kind of peel back the curtain, help you understand what's happening out there, and more specifically and most importantly, what it means for you in your individual situation. So let's start off with inflation. I mean, seriously, all you have to do is go to the grocery store and it's staring you right in the face, right? Yeah. It's at the top of everyone's minds. So how do you see inflation currently impacting both pre-retirees and retirees?
Yeah, I mean, inflation's a big, big deal now, more so than it's been probably in the last 20 years or more. And it impacts us. Funny story, if you just go back in time, I remember when I first moved to California in 2001, and I went to Pebble Beach. And I remember I went with my wife, Sarah. It wasn't my wife at the time. And I got a cheeseburger, and it was $15. And I thought, that was a good cheeseburger. I don't know about a $15.
$15 worth.
$15 cheeseburger.
Yeah.
Okay, now fast forward to 2023. Every cheeseburger almost everywhere is $10 to $25. Right. And so who would have ever figured that you'd be paying Pebble Beach prices everywhere you go, right? So now fast forward in the future, can you imagine paying for a $35 or $40 cheeseburger? Who knows? I mean, that's what inflation does. And so we have to prepare for it. We've most recently seen a lot of big, I don't want to get political here, but we've had inflation from some obvious things. We've had the Ukraine-Russia war. Right. That's driven up the price of wheat and grain around the world. We've seen COVID was a big factor with the supply chain, and we've seen supply chain issues also with the war, but that just backs things up, causes from everything from, we were talking earlier, redoing a bathroom or your floors, or there's so many different things that can cause this.
And that trickle down effect, if you will, right?
Trickles down. Think of the cost of gas, and when gas goes up, that means it costs more to deliver food and goods and things like that. So everything else goes up. How much more are we paying for a loaf of bread now than we've ever paid? So there's a lot of things, and you can relate this. There are great websites you can go and look at what was the cost of a house, or the cost of bread, or the cost of stamps, or from 1960 or 1980, and you think about where it is today, and it's almost scary to think, what will it be 20, 30 years from now? But that's why we have to have a plan. We have to plan for that increase. If you're on a fixed income, and your income stays the same forever, but the prices keep getting higher, that's going to create a problem.
No, for sure.
You think of it, I'd probably stay off that website because it's probably more depressing than anything. And it has the effect, as Chris referenced, in terms of budgeting, because generally when we're moving in retirement, we're looking at budget and what do I need to live on per month. Say it's $5,000. Well, maybe 3 years ago it was $5,000. Now that you've been retired for 3 years, it's $6,000 for all the same stuff, and it's kind of retaining what's called purchasing power. Because I was looking at the facts the other day. Through September, rent was up 8%. Restaurants are up 6.5%. We talked about that super expensive cheeseburger. Maybe it was grass-fed and had a first name.
I'm a fan of that.
The cow had a first name and was treated very respectfully.
Well, California cows are happy cows.
Yes, that's it. That's right.
They're massaged and everything. Housing costs 5% up. Personal care. Chris is wearing makeup, literally, for the show. That's up.
You are too.
I am
full
too.
Disclaimer
full disclaimer. But it just comes in. It's stuff that we used to not be concerned with. Just those little things, the day-to-day, that's adding up, and that's where it's becoming a factor when we're trying to budget and map out, say, someone's 20, 25, 30-year retirement plan, and when we're trying to retain the purchasing power, and that's where we've always done it when we're creating a retirement income plan. We have an inflation number built in. Generally, we go by 3%. It's not always
because that's the
high.
long-term historical rate over,
that's right.
You know, for so many years. I think that's why inflation, we were kind of lulled to sleep with it. It wasn't really on the top of our minds, but then once it spiked the way that it has the last few years,
yeah. So it's being mindful. No one was surprised, or at least no one was surprised by inflation as a whole. People were surprised by the staggering numbers of it when it was up over 8%, when we're used to 2.5 to 3.5. So that's why we always say we need to, as we're mapping these things out, creating a retirement income plan for someone, we need to have it baked in, because say Jane Doe retires now and she needs $5,000 a month. Well, if we're inflating it at 3% for all the same stuff, for the equivalent of $5,000, you know, in the future, she might need 6, and in 15 years, it might be 7. So otherwise, we're going to be surprised. We will run out of money, because that is always the biggest fear, is running out of money. And inflation is, they always say blood pressure is the silent killer. I always feel like inflation and increasing costs are the silent killer of a retirement plan.
Yeah, known as the hidden tax, right?
Yeah.
Like we're all paying it, but it's not always on top of mind, but of course it's been more recently. You know, to your point, my sister-in-law is about to celebrate her 50th birthday, and I was buying some decorations for the party, and I bought one of those things that says back in 1973, you know, what was the cost? And I think the average cost of a house was $32,000, right? I mean, it's less than what most people pay for a new car today. So it's just crazy when you look at those stats, for sure. Well, along with inflation, interest rates are kind of going hand in hand with this. So we've been seeing a lot of interest rate hikes so far this year. So how is that affecting, how are these rate changes specifically affecting the way people are investing their money?
It's affected a lot. We have a lot more, especially where we look at our safe money. If we rewind the clock, we go back to the 80s, the average interest rates were pretty high, but the average stock market returned over 18%. So sometimes people forget that.
Right.
So we can't just move all of our money to these safe places getting 4 or 5% because we still need bigger growth over time to stay ahead of inflation. But, you know, to your point, you can find 1-year CDs now at 4.5 to 5.5%. Interestingly, you can't really find 3-year CDs that high. So it's a short-term thing right now. But when you look at savings account, money market accounts, we can get, I'm not going to mention them, but some of the top banks are still at 0.015. I mean, they're low. But a lot of the other banks are at, you know, 4.5, 5, 5.15%. You can get it on your mobile phone. You can use links to just move money into savings accounts getting over 4.5%. And then money market accounts, some of them are near 5% right now.
Right.
So it's a much different situation with your safe money. But we still want to have money invested for growth for the long term. And that's why it's important to have it, to have a full financial plan, to know how much money should be in each bucket.
For sure. I mean, there's such a balance there. You know, you have to look at both sides of that equation. So how are you able, I know you do this day in, day out. You meet with folks, you help develop individualized, customized, personalized financial plans that take these things into consideration. So how does working with someone such as yourselves really benefit people when they're looking at the impact of the economy on their financial plan?
Well, it's factoring everything, because right now we're just talking about these inflation numbers, interest rates. Obviously, there's all these other byproducts of that, but there are so many other things that we need to talk about when we sit down with someone. And you know, there's a number below where if you have questions about any of these things, we can certainly have a conversation. You can call or use the little code there and schedule a complimentary, no obligation, what we call a financial compass review, where we can sit down and talk about these things. We can talk about your income plan. If it hasn't been reviewed in a while, or maybe it's never been done, well, now's probably the time to sit down and have that discussion and see how these things affect you, but you know, what ways can we work around it to make sure it's not an issue. So call the number. We'd be happy to chat with you.
Wonderful. Scott, Chris, thank you so much. To our viewers at home, that number to call is on the bottom of your screen, 888-970-4685, or you're welcome to take out your smartphone. You can simply scan that QR code down in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. That will take you over to a landing page, ask you a few short, simple questions, and a member of the team from Bulman Wealth Group will reach out to you, connect with you, and set up your time to come in to get your complimentary financial compass review. It's a complimentary written financial plan for no cost, no charge, no obligation. When we come back, we're going to be diving more deeply into the impact of what's happening with the economy out there on your retirement plan. Stay with us.
I became a financial advisor coming out of the tough times of the tech bubble in the late 90s, early 2000s. Moved to California, uprooted my life, changed everything, and then 9/11 happened the first week in this industry. I was prepared already to help people from tough times coming out of the tech bubble, but what we didn't expect is there were 3 years in a row when I started of the market dropping. That really impacted my whole career. It crafted and created how we manage money. We don't want our clients to ever lose like that. And so everything we do is built on protection. The goal of our practice and the people that we meet with is to remove the fear and uncertainty that we all face. And it goes back to those first years in the market.
I was a sportscaster on television. I grew up in Flint, Michigan. In TV, you bounce around, and went to Mississippi and worked at the NBC station there and covered, college football's big, NFL's big, all that stuff. And a guy I knew relatively well in a different state decided to get out of TV, and in this opportunity, I always enjoyed finance and money, and it seemed really exciting. I like to communicate to folks and feel like I can communicate well. It was such a fresh, kind of different career than what I was used to that it was exciting.
We go into every meeting with no place to get. We're there to meet with you, to discover your needs, find out where you are at that point, and how we can help you build and craft that plan for the future.
Welcome back, California. You're watching Your Financial Compass, brought to you by the team of Bulman Wealth Group. I'm here with Chris Bulman and Scott Vlahon. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley. We are talking today about the impact of the economy on your retirement plan, on your financial plan. And we've covered in the first segment, we talked about inflation. We talked about the interest rate hikes. It's time to talk about market volatility, something that you all navigate day in, day out. You help folks navigate the complexities of market volatility. So have you been receiving calls from folks this year who are concerned, especially after what happened in 2022? What are you seeing? What is kind of the mood and the pulse of that situation for folks?
Yeah, in regards to the question, are we receiving calls? Yes and no. Yes, because the market volatility always breeds the instability, and certain people, just by their demeanor, might be affected more than others. So yeah, naturally we're going to get calls, and just making sure, hey, a lot of the calls would be, what are your thoughts? Hey, the Silicon Valley Bank issue just happened. What are your thoughts on that? Sometimes they just want to hear from their advisor, just to explain kind of from our vantage point what we see.
Right, and translate what it means for them, right?
Correct. And then on the flip side is, I would argue, how we prepare portfolios and things, maybe it's less inclined to be moving up and down rapidly. Obviously, the economy and the market volatility can bring accounts down, but if we go in prepared with expectations, generally it's not going to be these panicked calls.
Yes.
But anytime there's volatility, especially after we had this 10+ year bull market run, well, the last year and a half has been
all over the place.
All over the place. Right. So it's been a whole different environment.
But to your point, even in the 10-year bull market run from 2009 on, there were multiple, probably as many as 10 pullbacks of 5 to 10% or more. It's just they were short enough, and then they popped back enough that a lot of times we forget. We tell clients all the time, volatility isn't the abnormal time in the market. Volatility is the normal time.
Right.
That's what the market does, right? It only does one of two things, so, up and down.
Yeah, and if it always went up, then it would be too easy, and everyone would just do it, and then money wouldn't mean anything. Because it's like just pulling the lever and always winning, and that just doesn't, it's not how the stock market works.
Right.
On average, you're going to see maybe 3 years out of every 10 are going to be negative years, and maybe 7 positive years. So, and then depending on when you get in or out of the market during those years, your numbers will be a little bit different. But the first thing to understand is volatility is normal.
Yes.
And as soon as you get that out and understand that, then when the market starts dropping, you're not picking up the phone and calling, because your advisor told you the market was going to drop.
Right.
And we're prepared for that. We've prepared short, mid, and long term for those market drops and gains. The other thing is to have a plan, which is what we talk about here every week. Have a plan, be diversified, have a plan that accounts for this year, next year, 5 years, 10 years, and for the rest of your life. Have guarantees where possible, have guaranteed income streams where necessary, and work with someone who takes your income streams, your expenses, the volatility, your taxes, everything, and puts it into one plan and shows you what it can look like over time with some relative certainty within reason. So.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and to your point, it's proper diversification, right? It's diversification across asset classes. Because we've talked about before how some folks think they're diversified when really they just own the same stocks across a bunch of different mutual funds. And that's not really true diversification.
Yeah, so it's that aspect of knowing, am I taking advantage of all the different sectors of the market that helps generally can reduce some of the risk. But probably even more, or just as important as that is, what is your risk tolerance? Because we say this all the time, and when we meet with someone for the first time, before we have a second meeting, we have them take a risk test, because there's been countless times where we've met with folks over the years where they feel like the risk level is high, like they're open to it. Hey, John Doe's open to a lot of risk. And then when the market's doing well, they feel great about it. Yeah, this is great. I'm making all these big returns.
Right.
But then when the market turns, then you really see what their appetite for risk was. It's like getting punched in the face, and they realize that they weren't open to as much risk as they thought. They don't have the
stomach for it.
So it's like you go into the Mexican restaurant, the Thai restaurant. It's like, how spicy do you want the meal? Go in knowing, because the ramifications of that. Chris starts sweating and he can't do it. But it's knowing what your risk level is.
Or blackjack. You see, the commercials and people are waving money and chips and having fun. They're smiling. They don't show them dragging themselves out of the casino at the end of the day because they didn't really have it ends at some point. You got to be prepared for that. Pull money off the table. Be diversified, however you want to look at it.
Right, for sure. Well, and it's interesting when you were talking about what the stock market does, right? It does one of two things. It goes up, it goes down. I always like to say when it goes down, that just means everything's on sale, right? That's how you buy low. You take advantage of those dips. And I love that your plan helps account for all this. And if I can brag on you guys for a little bit, I know that probably the reason why a lot of folks aren't calling you panicked is because you engage in this comprehensive, holistic financial planning process. You're looking at how, as we always say, how you make a decision in one area does affect all the others. That's the difference.
Yeah, and can you keep bragging on it?
Always.
So, and that's part of what, when we sit down with someone and we referenced a few minutes ago, find out what their risk tolerance is. We find out what the risk level of their current portfolio is, and we want to see, are we in alignment or not? So, if you're watching this show and this is you, maybe you haven't rebalanced your portfolio in a while, or maybe you're not really sure if has your risk tolerance changed, because from what we found, the majority of folks who we work with in their 60s and beyond aren't open as much risk as they used to be.
Right.
It's not true in every case, but many cases it is. So one of the things that will happen when you call the number, schedule this complimentary financial compass review, is we're going to do a risk analysis. You're going to meet with Chris or I or one of our other advisors, and we'll get to know your situation, but then we'll also find out what your risk number is. You'll take a test. It takes 5 minutes. It's actually kind of fun. But map it to your investments. Is it in alignment? If it's not, it might be jarring, but it's better to find out now. We can start making adjustments. So that's one of the things we're going to do. If risk is a concern of yours, or you don't like what you're seeing in the market, we'll certainly have more discussions to see, are there tweaks that can be made to the portfolio? And that's certainly one of the things we'll do in this complimentary meeting that we have.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, Scott, Chris, thank you. To our viewers at home, if you're sitting there going, yes, I would like to have this comprehensive written financial plan, and as part of that, engage in this risk analysis. Do you know how much risk you're currently taking in your investments? Are you taking too much or maybe not enough? We encourage you, call that number on the bottom of your screen, 888-970-4685, or you can scan that QR code in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and that will get you connected as well. More on this week's episode when we return.
As a good saver, you've been putting away money during your working years. Studies find that the biggest fear of retirees is running out of money. Market volatility isn't just the downward movement of stock prices, it's the size and frequency of change. The more dramatic the ups and downs, the higher the volatility. This can put savers who are newly retired or a few years away from being retired at greater risk. Today's generation of retirees is not receiving traditional pensions as our parents or grandparents did. Instead, we have retirement accounts such as 401ks or 403bs. These accounts typically expose your money to market risk. The last thing you want right before retirement is to lose a portion of the money you need for income. But how do you turn these accounts into a retirement income? Is it safe to keep all your retirement money sitting in the stock market? The last thing you want is to lose a portion of the money you need for income due to market loss. By working with a financial professional, you can learn how to turn a portion of your savings into an income stream for life and income for the life of your spouse if you're married. We all have moments in our lives when we wish we had taken action sooner. Don't let procrastination reign on your retirement parade. Act now before it's too late. Please call our office to set up your no-cost, no-obligation retirement income review today.
Welcome back to Your Financial Compass. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley. I'm here with Chris Bulman and Scott Vlahon from Bulman Wealth Group. We are talking today about making sure that you have a solid retirement plan in place despite whatever the economy is doing. We want you to be prepared. So we've already talked today on the show about inflation. We've talked about interest rates. We've talked about market volatility. But at the end of the day, the three of us know, and I think we've shared before, that combined we have over 50 years of experience in this industry. Hard to believe. We don't look as old as we are, right?
No.
Yeah, that's the makeup.
Right. But it's really at the end of the day about income, making sure you have enough income to last you throughout your retirement. So how do you help folks when you're building this retirement income plan? How do you take all these factors into consideration to make sure that solid plan can be in place?
Well, there's a lot of conversation that goes into what kind of money are you spending now? That's one of the biggest things that we see. A lot of times we'll do a plan and we'll say, wow, you have an extra $10,000 a month. And they'll look at each other and go, we do? And I'll say, well, either you do or you didn't give me the proper budgeting numbers, right?
Yeah. Right.
So that's one of the first things, is to understand where are we spending our money, and really take stock of that. And I don't want to be that financial advisor that tells you, don't go to Starbucks or don't go spend money here. That's up to you where you spend your money, but you should be able to track where you're spending your money.
Yep.
And if we get honest and accurate numbers on where you're spending your money, then we know how much money we have, we know how much money we're going to make, and we can build out the plan from there. Then it's about revisiting it ongoing.
Right.
So a lot of my clients, $1 million, $2 million or higher, we meet with quarterly. And so we'll meet and we'll go over those plans and continue to update. One of the interesting things that I see, especially early in retirement, and some of my clients are, I'm sure, watching and can relate to this, but early on, they go into retirement and they're thinking, here's how much money we spend, here's our risk level, we're okay with risk and we want to, go for the big gains. Then maybe a year or two in, they get that, what we were just talking about, that punch where it's one of those 3, out of 10 years where the market pulls back.
Right.
Then at our next meeting, they say, well, maybe we weren't okay with that much risk. Maybe we want to pare it back a little bit. And by the way, we're spending a little bit more money. And by the way, we want to give some money to our kids, and we're going to help our youngest with a new house or a car or college for our grandchildren. So those first maybe 3 to 5 years of retirement, what I've seen over my 22 years or so in this business, people really start to get used to what it's like on their own paycheck. In other words, they've gotten that last paycheck from work. Now they're taking money from their own accounts. They're realizing what their real risk tolerance is, and we're kind of reshaping their financial future or picture as we go, because it does change.
Yes.
We all get older. We all get a little bit skittish. We all want less risk, and for
want less spice in the food, right?
Less spice in the food, yeah. Maybe a 2 out of 5 instead of a 5 out of 5. If you're going out for Thai food, which we have tons around our office and we love. But we want a little bit less risk. We want that roller coaster ride to get a little smoother.
Right.
And roller coasters are fun, but you don't want your financial plan to be like a roller coaster ride.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Another thing, I had some clients that did this, a practice that I'm surprised I don't see more. Maybe it happens more than I'm aware of, but they knew, as we were mapping everything out, they knew they were retiring in a year. They actually started, looking ahead, they knew what their Social Security was going to be. They knew what their pensions were going to be. So that it was less than they were making then, as Chris referenced. You stop going from being paid by a company to paying yourself. They started living each month at that new level of, say they were making $10,000 a month and used to that was going to drop to $7,500. They started living on that lower budget a year ahead of time. So then when they got there, it wasn't this jarring,
huge shock.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
So that was something that stood out to me that I really liked. Another thing when it comes to income planning, because I just referenced pensions, all the pensions are different.
Yes.
Some of them have what's called a cost of living adjustment built in, where it might increase 2-3% a year. A lot of state workers here in the area. Not all pensions have that. Some are set. So say you're getting $5,000 a month. Well, that's nice. especially when you first retire, 10 years down the road, that $5,000 won't stretch as far.
Well, because that inflation comes into play, like we talked about at the beginning of the show, right?
And it does. So it's being mindful of, does my pension have a cost of living adjustment to it? And if not, I'm going to have to kind of build in some ways to work around that. And we keep talking about all these bad things that come from it, or the negative things, but generally in all these situations, there are opportunities. Chris and I work with annuities sometimes, and when interest rates are high, markets are volatile, annuities actually have better rates and more attractive rates. So maybe you have an old annuity, or are you thinking about looking into one? Well, the rates are better. It's not a fit in every situation, but we talk about refinancing annuities. Now's a good time to look into it. So that is an opportunity that's presented itself in a good way from some of this volatility and turbulence.
Well, and that's, that goes right hand in hand with what we're seeing. In 2023, annuity sales have skyrocketed for that very reason. A lot of folks were really taken aback with what happened in 2022. They were looking for that safer place to put their money, and I think that speaks directly to that.
Yeah, and when we talk about interest rates and interest rate risk, if you go into a one-year CD right now, you might get 4.5% to 5.5%, but your interest rate risk is high right now, meaning that a year from now, interest rates when your CD renews might be 3% or 2.5%. Right. We don't know. But if you are okay with tying it up in a 5-year CD, well, 5-year CDs are less. But a 5-year fixed annuity is going to give you probably 5 to 6%. And that's 5 to 6% every year for the next 5 years.
Right.
And so you can kind of lock in those rates for a longer period using a fixed annuity right now. And maybe you're in a fixed annuity right now that you've been wanting to review, or you haven't heard from your advisor since you bought it. This is a great opportunity. We've never seen, this is the equivalent of when we saw interest rates at 2.5%, 3% for refinancing your house.
Right.
That's the equivalent of where we're at right now for annuities. So if you have an annuity out there and you've been thinking about reviewing it and you haven't, you want to talk to someone, right now is the best time I've seen in the last 20 to 25 years to do that. And again, give us a call at the number below on your screen, and we'll give you a review of your current annuity and let you know what's available.
I love that you provide that place, because there a lot of people, I think, get into annuities and don't even know what they have. So that's very valuable.
Certainly.
Awesome. Well, Scott, Chris, it's always a joy to be with you. This time goes by so quickly. To our viewers at home, we appreciate you watching. But again, that number to call to get your own financial compass review, 888-970-4685, or you're welcome to scan that QR code and that will get you connected as well. We appreciate you joining us. We hope you found this to be educational and valuable. That's how it's intended each and every week. We love you, California, and we'll see you next time.